thrilled that you could get up early this morning on this beautiful day, and it is a beautiful day. I hear it's going to get hot again, but today's supposed to be special. So we're so happy to have you here, and we welcome you to the Communities Foundation of Texas. We are so pleased that we could join with the Texas Tribune today to bring you today's program. These wonderful, wonderful state reps and senator. Before I start, I do want to recognize back in the back Dave Scullin, who is our CEO and at the Communities Foundation of Texas and does an amazing job. So we are so thrilled that you could be here with us. Thank you, Dave. I am Florence Shapiro, and I am a trustee of this beautiful, wonderful building that has wonderful work being done here every single day, the Communities Foundation of Texas. I welcome you here today, and as I said, we're thrilled to partner today with the Texas Tribune and to have the opportunity to talk to you through these wonderful legislators about what happened in the 86th legislative session. So many terrific opportunities. I know we have Carl. Besides Carl Sherman, is there anyone, another legislator who's here? Carl, why don't you stand? Carl Sherman, Dallas State Representative, thank you. Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure if there was anybody else, but I spotted Carl and I thought, well, I better say something. Everyone else will be introduced in just a minute. We are going to be having this post-session wrap-up. Most of you have probably read lots of things over the last several weeks since the session ended, but this is the period in which the governor starts signing lots of bills or vetoing some. He has vetoed some, and then those that are not signed or vetoed go into effect after that. But the Texas Tribune has been traveling throughout the state, talking to different organizations, to different communities about what happened in the last legislative session and recapping the major policy issues. Today, we are very fortunate that they have decided to come to Dallas. And when the Tribune approached us meaning Communities Foundation of Texas, that they wanted to host an event in Dallas, we were thrilled. Since its inception 10 years ago, and it has been 10 years, which is hard to believe, isn't it? Since its inception 10 years ago, the Texas Tribune has reported on the political landscape of Texas and done an amazing job. Yes, they've done the good, and they've done the bad, and even sometimes they've done the ugly. But they're always reporting, and you can always use them as a weather vane as to what's going on in the state of Texas. It's been a joy to watch them grow and prosper, and they have so well respected throughout the state, and particularly in Austin, Texas, during the legislative session. We can use their guidance on many issues. Today, we are going to focus a lot on a lot of other issues, but I cannot tell you how important, in my opinion, it is to focus on education. We know that at the beginning of this legislative session, everyone in Austin, from the leadership down through the legislature, made a very clear and important decision that education was going to be the number one issue to deal with, and they did not disappoint at all. CFT and our education-focused initiative called Educate Texas have been proud to be on the ground floor with the Texas Tribune since 2009 when the Tribune was launched, and we are very proud. We were very proud then to participate, and we're very proud today, 10 years later, to also be a supporter and a partner of the Tribune. The work that the Texas Tribune has done to inform and to educate Texans, and sometimes even other states and throughout the country, because we know they pick up some of their stories all over the country, goes beyond many of the key issues and many of the topics that we are going to discuss today. Similarly, the Communities Foundation of Texas exists to stimulate creative solutions to key challenges and in communities around the state. Many of the focus areas of this year's legislative session were very important: healthcare, taxes, community colleges, workforce, human trafficking. Every aspect of public education was scrutinized and discussed and rediscussed. And many of these have great implications for all of us here in this room and beyond. So, of course, it made a lot of sense to host this important and informative event right here at CFT. Public education was the highlight of the 86th legislative session. From my perspective, public education is probably the key and most important thing that we can do for the future of the state of Texas. It's very near and dear to my heart. For those of you that don't know, I was the chair of the Senate Education Committee for 10 years. It's hard to believe. And we tried many of those years to revamp and reform public education, but it took this legislature to actually make the true vital change that was so desperately needed, and I'm very proud of the fact that they did this. I have also spent a lot of my career working on education issues. For 25 years in the legislature, I served on the education committee and spent a lot of time looking at, pondering, wondering, trying to fix the education structure, and I'm proud to say that today they did a very important and yeoman's work. What took 300 pages and 18 months to create can be summed up in these very few words. Obviously, it's much larger than this. The legislature comprehensively reformed the Texas school finance system, investing $6.5 billion for the next biennium, targeted strategically to improve student outcomes and better compensate our teachers. This bill represents, in my view, an unprecedented, and I don't use that word lightly, unprecedented investment in the school children and the teachers of Texas. It has been a joy to watch, and I honestly do believe that if you look around this country, Texas is going to become the model for the rest of the nation. We did outcomes-based funding for college, career, and military readiness. There is no outcomes-based funding model to follow in the United States. We will become that model. I believe that each of these legislators sitting here and their colleagues have made a huge investment in the future of this great state through this historic bill. I want to thank each of you panelists for being here today and for setting the bar as high as you did for Texas students and teachers. I truly believe that no other state has done this, as I said, and we have laid a foundation for many years to come. So join me in welcoming Texas State Representative Angie Chen Button, House District 112 from Richardson, Texas Representative Jessica González, House District 104 from Dallas, State Senator Nathan Johnson, Senate District 16 from Dallas, and Morgan Meyer, State Representative from House District 108 in Dallas. I would also like to introduce to you Ayan Mittra, who is the editor of the Texas Tribune and will be our moderator for the morning. Thank you, each and every one of you, for joining us today. We really do believe that this event is going to be one that you will walk away learning a lot more than you probably thought you would, but these are great experts in many areas of the legislature. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I can still call you Senator, right, Senator Shapiro? Good morning, everyone. My name is Ayan Mittra. I'm the editor of the Texas Tribune, and welcome to our discussion on Dallas and the 86th Legislature. Before we get going with the panel, just a few things I want to mention. First of all, I'd like to thank the Communities Foundation of Texas for hosting this event, and a huge thank you to Carol Goglia and Lisa Causey for their help in organizing this great event. I'd also like to express our appreciation to the following sponsors of this event. These events don't happen without the work of these great sponsors as well. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Texas, AT&T, Walmart, the Meadows Foundation, the Texas Women's Foundation, and Educate Texas. Thank you all. I will quickly note that although donors and corporate sponsors underwrite our events, they play no role in determining the content, panelists, or line of questioning. And if you'll indulge me, I'd just like to plug a couple of quick things for the Tribune. Passes for the 2019 Texas Tribune Festival, which is happening September 26th through 28th in downtown Austin, are on sale. It's one of the largest nonpartisan gatherings of elected officials, policy experts, and community leaders in the nation. The event brings Texans to the table to address the policy changes that affect our communities, our schools, our work, and our daily lives. You can learn more at festival.texastribune.org. We're a nonprofit newsroom, the Tribune, so we rely on members to keep our stories free and our events open to the public. That means all of our journalism, including events like this, are made possible by folks just like you. Please become a member now by giving in any amount you can at texastribune.org/give. Okay, now if you would please silence your phones while we're doing our conversation. If you're tweeting from this event, you please use the hashtag #TTEvents. We're going to do about an hour of discussion. This is going to include about 40 to 45 minutes of Q&A that's moderated, and then we'll open it up for audience questions. I don't know if we have mics around, but we'll repeat your question from up here so everyone can hear. Before we get into it, I just want to do quick introductions of our panelists. First, State Representative Angie Chen Button, who represents House District 112, which includes portions of Garland, Richardson, Rowlett, Saxe, Wiley, and Dallas. During the 86th session, she was appointed to chair the Urban Affairs Committee and serves on the Higher Education Committee. State Representative Jessica González is serving her first term in District 104, which includes the Oak Cliff neighborhood in Dallas, as well as a swath of Grand Prairie. She has her own law practice in the district and spent much of the 86th session working on the state's criminal justice system and addressing voting rights. Elected in 2018, Senator Nathan Johnson represents Senate District 16, which includes the northern part of Dallas County. After graduating from the University of Arizona with a degree in physics, he earned his law degree from UT Austin. State Representative Morgan Meyer represents House District 108, which includes downtown Dallas, uptown Dallas, East Dallas, which includes the M Streets in Lower Greenville, Preston Hollow, the city of University Park, and the town of Highland Park. In his third term, Representative Meyer serves as chair of the House General Investigating Committee and is on several other committees, including the Public Education Committee, and he's a partner at Wick Phillips Law Firm. We did not purposely put you on the far right of the panel, Representative, but that's where you just ended up.
Right, thank you for that.
We are going to start with, the title of this panel is Dallas and the Legislature. So the first question I have to ask is, was this session good for the Dallas and the greater Dallas area? Representative Chen Button, I'll start with you. Was this a good session for the region?
This is a great session for all the Texans, okay? For the Dallas area, and I am a co-chair for the Dallas delegation for the House Representatives. I work diligently with my counterpart, Representative Victoria Neave, and we want to make sure that all our colleagues know the importance of the major issues. You remember that all the meetings we try to, please come to the meetings, and we got several people here who has presented in our meeting. So it has been a fairly good session, but I have to be really honest to tell you, it could be better. It could be better. The reason is that in terms of the appropriations committee, the money allocation, which is extremely, extremely important, we don't have the cloud as big as the Houston and some other areas. So we do have a subcommittee chair, Tony Rose. She has done a wonderful job, and we also have a couple members serve. But we need to have more cloud. And for example, I'm seeing my dear friend, UTD's representative, Amanda Rockout, right there. One thing I am very, very disappointed is, you remember we talked about the trip, the matching, the research matching program for UTD and several other universities like UT Arlington. We worked so hard. The last session, we didn't have much movement, but this session, the House, we got a real major push, and the chairman of the appropriation, Dr. Zerwas, he knows I went to bug him almost every other day. He looked at me, he said, stop right there, I know you are gonna talk about trip. So we did very, very well in the House, but Senate, it's a different story. So we're gonna make sure that we fully utilize our great senator here who has been so helpful. I wanna take this chance to thank you for helping me to pass two major bills in my district, Raleigh and Garland. And the next time, we're gonna bug you to death so we can have more clout, okay?
Representative Meyer.
Sure. Well, first off, thanks for having us this morning. I would actually say as well, for serving on the Public Education Committee, I think it was a huge win for Dallas, a huge win for Dallas. As a co-author of HB 3, I think all of us were here in the House and in the Senate as well, is that, as Senator Shapiro noted, was by far the landmark legislation. Transformative is the word that is often used for this past session. And in Dallas, in particular, DISD, we are going to realize in saved recapture money as well as new revenue between $550 and $600 million over the next 2 years. Let that sink in. I mean, $550 to $600 million in saved recapture and new funds. I believe in year one, we were going to, DISD was going to have to pay out 186. It's down to 12 million. In year two is 268 million in recapture, down to 15 million. In year one, 70 million new dollars go into DISD. In year two, 50 million new dollars go into the Dallas School District. And as public education is my top priority, as I know it is here for every panelist, I would say that's a huge win. I say we had a great session. We did well. We are arming our teachers and our superintendents and our students with the ability to progress and the ability for us to have, DISD is an amazing school district, but we enabled it with new funds to get even better. And I have to tell you, for me, that is by far a huge success and a huge win for not only DISD, but obviously when it's a win for our DISD kids, and Highland Park ISD for that matter, it's a win for all of us.
Senator.
Thank you. I'm really pleased that Morgan had all the numbers, because I didn't. But I agree absolutely with what Representative Meyer said. It is a big win for Dallas. Dallas has been leading the state in education reforms. There's a lot of talk. There's not unanimity about how things ought to happen. But the fact that things finally are happening. I know, Senator Shapiro, you must be looking at this thinking, oh, where was the will of the state when I was chair of the Education Committee, and thank you for all your efforts. And really, it's those efforts. What happens in the legislature, I've learned this year as a freshman, it happens slowly. And it takes session after session after session of people working on things, and they can be out of office when finally their vision comes to pass. Now, you're talking about how was the session for Dallas. One thing, I don't think we're getting as much credit as we ought to. The voters of this city, and I don't really mean this along partisan lines, it kind of falls, it starts to sound a little partisan, but when you think about what happened, we flipped a bunch of, frankly, far-right seats to Democratic seats. The two Republicans sitting up here today were strong on education, and I think that's why they're here today. Because statewide, we had an education referendum, and it was led by reforms in the Dallas School District and pushed by the voters of Dallas along a bipartisan basis. So I think it's a tremendous accomplishment by North Texas, not just Dallas, but this whole North Texas region, and the beneficiary has been the students of the entire state. So I think the whole state should thank North Texas, frankly. A couple of things that we didn't get that we wanted. I know Representative Button mentioned the funding for UT Dallas and some UT Arlington. I think the state owes us, what, $40 million, is it, at UT Dallas? Sorry, $50 million. And this is money that the state already committed. We just didn't get around to actually giving them the money that we said we were going to. Also, one real big loss so far is in inpatient medical beds. Other regions of the state are getting treated far better than Dallas is, and I know that we as a delegation are going to be working to bring that funding. It's so vital, it's so helpful socially, it's so vital to our economy. We really want to bring that up. And then the last thing that I think was a bit lamentable this session is there was an all-out assault on the ability of cities to govern themselves. And the municipal regions of North Texas have done a marvelous job. And why suddenly these cities are creating all these jobs and everybody's coming up and they're having good forward-thinking education and social policies and economic advancement, why we suddenly think the state needs to come in and fix things is beyond me. And that is a shift I would like to see in the next session, away from the big state control, and allow cities like Dallas and Addison and Garland and Saxony and Rowlett and all these cities up here, sorry if I dropped you out, give them back the power to govern the effective way that they've been governing.
Representative González.
Well, we didn't see any fistfights on the floor this session, so I think we can say that overall, yes, absolutely, it was a great session. As a freshman, I don't have a previous session to compare it to, but as a spectator from last session, I'm not going to reiterate what happened then. Yes, absolutely, we saw everybody trying to work together. I think the it's undeniable that this happened because there was a change in the mood of the mood in the House, and ultimately, elections have consequences, right? And we did see, and as Nathan said, we did flip, these seats from Republican to Democrat this last cycle, and that really did help change the mood in the House. That the voters wanted to see us working on the real issues, the two main ones that we all heard about. Every representative, all 150 of us, said that our constituents wanted us to work on public education and property tax reform. And so that's what we did. And so I think overall, yes, for Dallas, but for Texas overall, this was a very great session.
Can I just say, since I'm chairing the Urban Affairs Committee, I want to say that Representative González has been a wonderful member of my committee. And guess what? The newly soon-to-be the Mayor, Eric Johnson, is also a member of my committee. So I'm so proud to work with those wonderful fellows in my committee, and has been such a enjoyable session.
I think the representative just basically took credit for Eric Johnson's election. Are you like basically? We talked a lot about public education school finance. I want to dive deeper into the House Bill 3, the bill that passed and was just signed into law this week by Governor Abbott. We talk a lot about the top lines, the figures, the $6.5 billion in new spending, $5.1 billion going towards lowering property taxes, per student funding going up, full-day pre-K for more kids. Could you talk, this is for the group, talk a little bit more about what actually schools and teachers and students, basically on the ground in Dallas, what will they see differently as a result of this bill? Not necessarily just the numbers, but what will actually change as a result? Yeah, this is for the group.
Sure. No, I think I might have referenced some of the numbers before, but as Senator Johnson said, there is another part in this bill which is very, very important, and DISD led the way on merit-based pay for teachers, and saw how that can transform school districts. I believe these are the numbers, is that prior to Dallas instituting this program 5 years ago, there were about 40 failing schools. Within 4 years, it reduced the number down to 4. And so in Dallas, we are already there. You're going to see that throughout the state, is by putting teachers, incentivizing teachers to go to schools which otherwise are not performing, helps not only the schools that they're going to, but the school districts. And we made it as well, which folks should know, we made it to where it is elective by the school districts. We didn't say, hey, look, you have to do this. We said, hey, look, here is some money if, in fact, this is something which is good for your school district. Because what might be good for DISD may not be good for Richardson ISD or Lubbock ISD. And so we really made it flexible, and I think you're going to see that as well, is that we provided the resources, but we provided the flexibility because we know that the particular superintendents know what is best for their school district. And so I think, I mentioned the numbers, which I believe kind of goes to your question, but also I want folks to realize, we said, look, we are here to provide you the resources, but we believe you know best on how to allocate those resources, and I think you're going to see that in Dallas and elsewhere throughout the state. And I think that's an important factor of HB 3.
I like to talk about the background, how we put this together, and then the efforts we made. You mentioned, yes, DISD is a great role model for all the other schools. And in my district, I have RISD, Richardson ISD, and also Garland ISD. Both of the school districts, they also actively participated in this process. For example, like the RISD, the superintendent, Dr. Stone, he visited along with a delegation from the Richardson, and I showed her the cups that our speaker, Dennis Bonner, put together and put it into the members' lounge. He says, school finance reform now, which means if you don't repeat that to yourself 3 times a day, you don't get to have any coffee, okay? And that really made a difference is when I show Dr. Stone the cup and the drive we have to make that happen, and she was very moved. And then she asked each of us to sign the name, and she brought it back to show it to her her folks, her staffs, how hard we try to get things done. Then the chairman, Dan Huberty, my hat is off for him. He works so diligently. Let me just give you some examples. GISD Superintendent, Dr. Lopez, you know, he was very excited, but this is probably the first time he really get involved with this kind of major school finance reform. Well, probably for all of us, the first time. But he was so excited, so sometimes he will text or call Friday evening, 10 o'clock, something like that. And I make sure that the chairman, Dan Huberty, know what we were doing, and no matter where Chairman Huberty was, he was able to get back with us. It's just incredible that delegation, the dedication, and the time he spent. The speaker joked about if there's any superintendent in the state hasn't talked to Huberty, that's because therefore it's not that Huberty didn't want to spend time to talk to them. So this entire, you know, inspiration make us feel such a drive. We just gotta get it done, and I think that's why, you know, my mentor, Senator Florence Shapiro mentioned, it has been so hard, and all those years trying to make a difference, but we finally get it done. Yeah, so I was so moved by all the people getting involved, including myself.
Well, two of the main districts that I represent are DISD and Grand Prairie ISD. And I think two of the main impacts that the districts will feel is the funding that we get per student, and also less money that goes into recapture. And so the districts are going to feel the positive impact of that being the case. Now, the bill isn't perfect. Everybody wasn't completely 100% happy about it, but it's a starting point, right? And it was a way to get started, and now this is where the work begins, right? On working together on how we can improve it, how to sustain it.
It isn't perfect, but it was one of the examples of this past legislative session where compromise and pitting opposing forces against each other, I think, did result in something quite good. I know there's disagreement in this very room, probably on this stage, about certain aspects of it, but none of us knows everything. And this is overall a good bill, and we're going to be able to evaluate it over time, and things that aren't working, we'll fix. Some of us may see things that we thought were wrong, and it turns out they work quite well, and the opposite may happen. Ha, I told you. But that's part of the process. I think probably the single biggest victory for this district, and it's common throughout the state, but especially for Dallas, is the all-day pre-K. I know that's not an original thought, but it's so important. Yay for kids. The second significant thing for Dallas, I've forgotten. Does anybody remember Rick Perry? Yeah. There were two, I swear. I'm glad we have all-day pre-K. There are other good things within the recapture.
I can share my notes with you.
The second thing is, this is 20%, it says. I'll come back. I'll have a good idea on that in a minute.
Well, and just real quick, to the senator's point, A, all-day pre-K is something which we absolutely needed, and B, whenever we start out negotiating where the House is at $9 billion, the Senate is at $7 billion, and we end up at $11 billion for public education, that is a great finishing point, and it took bipartisanship to get there.
And it gave me just long enough to think of my second point.
There you go.
Actually, thank you, Representative. You see, we work together
Absolutely.
In this body. It is the discretion. And again, Representative Meyer mentioned this, but I've worked with many of you in the audience, many of the school board members. I've talked with principals, CFOs, and each population is unique, and the challenges that you each face is unique, and the fact that the bill that finally emerged, and there were competing factors and questions throughout the process of how much discretion these districts were going to be able to retain. They retained a healthy amount of discretion, which I think is going to be vital to improving education as we go forward.
Okay, so everyone on the panel here backed HB 3. I'd like to transition to a bill that did not have the support of everyone on the panel, and that's SB 2, Senate Bill 2, which is the property tax legislation. some of the top lines there is basically created a 3.5% election trigger for most cities and counties. It created an online database that helped bring about more transparency with property appraisals and property tax assessments, allotments. And then I guess there was a separate rollback trigger for community colleges and hospital districts. So first I'd like to start with the Republicans on the panel about what was right with this bill. And then I'd like to, have the Democrats on the panel follow up with what their concerns were about the legislation.
What is the right about this bill? It's because voters are telling us. I know the local city officials are not necessarily happy about that. But the fact is the voters are telling us this property tax has been really, really a major pain to the majority of the voters, and we have to listen to their concerns. But we also understand the local cities, they have their concerns too, especially several cities, they have to spend a lot of money for their public safety issues, the police, the firemen, like that. So we were talking actually behind the scenes to the members of the Ways and Means Committee and also to the leadership. Some of the things are personally involved. One is that certificate of obligations, and we were able to, first they have some kind of restrictions, and I talked to Chairman Dustin Barrows several times until bucking to death, and he said they took away that restriction. And also another issue is about that $250,000 minimum, and then double to $500,000 before they can run for another election like that. So those are the things I won't say is the major concerns for the local, but at least we helped them out, and also the school districts was excluded, okay? But the bottom line is, it is our responsibility to respond to the voters of our state. But one thing is that people don't realize that bill, and you mentioned briefly, that bill also give the transparency and also the methods, the most effective ways to enable the voters to make the protest, to understand their property tax, what really was calculated, and the appraisal process, where, when, and how to make their concerns heard. So I think that part of transparency and the effectiveness communication is equally important. Of course, it's not perfect, but on the other hand, we gotta do something, and it has been long overdue. And we just heard, every place I go to during the session, actually started a couple years ago. People ask that's kind of like another thing of no goodies go unpunished, because the economic development has been so strong. By the way, I used to chair the committee, so I can take a little credit. We created so many jobs, and then the next thing is the housing industry. It's a good thing to have, but I think it's this. Once again, I'm going to borrow the senator's word. It's not perfect, but it's a major progress, and it's a response to the majority of voters' concerns. We also work on limiting the impact to the local elected officials as much as we could. Okay.
Representative Meyer, I want to give you a chance to add on.
And I'm just going to respectfully disagree with your premise, because this bill had bipartisan support. That is one thing which is lost sometimes in the narrative. It's lost sometimes in the reporting. I believe Chairman Canales was there at the signing yesterday. I don't remember how many Democrats voted for it, but I do know a number did. So this is a bipartisan bill that Chairman Burrows did an excellent job on. And to Angie's point, I have only heard positive responses from my constituents. And it is not a cap, to your point, it is an election trigger, to where if the cities come to us or come to the voters and say, hey, look, we need this for X, Y, or Z, the voters get a chance to say. And that was one of the biggest concerns from my constituents, was the ability to have tax reform. And we also provided tax relief in HB3, which sometimes goes unnoticed, but we put $5 billion in HB3 into tax compression and compressing the rates. So for us, this was about transparency, which was by far number one issue. It was about having the voters have a say, which all of my constituents have said, yes, yes, yes. And quite frankly, I've even heard from some of my local elected officials saying, this is a good thing. This is a really good thing to help make sure that we are focused on spending appropriately and correctly and not off the charts. But again, respectfully disagreeing, this was a bipartisan bill. It had bipartisan support, and it was signed yesterday by the governor, and I think it's a very good step forward for the state of Texas.
Senator Johnson and Representative Gonzalez, Representative Meyer said this is a bipartisan effort, but you guys did not support or vote for it, if I'm not mistaken. What were your concerns? And to the point of perfect not being the enemy, this bill, neither one of Representative Meyer and Representative Button said this bill was perfect, but it did address a growing concern. And what were your concerns with this legislation?
There was bipartisan support for tax relief, although that phrase is a little hollow. There was certainly support. I certainly supported. I campaigned on it. I know Representative Gonzalez takes controlling the rising tax rates very, very seriously. I'm sure some Democrats voted for it in the House. I don't know, maybe a couple did in the Senate. I sure didn't. If I could vote again tomorrow, I'd vote against it again. And here's why. I think the entire concept of clamping down on the ability of cities to raise revenue is shifting blame to the cities for the faults of the state. The fact that your taxes got out of control has largely to do with the failure of the state to fund our school system. Now, there was kind of an ingenious mechanical mechanism to clamp down on school district revenue, and that forces, through some formula mechanisms, it forces the state to put money back in, and that is one way to address it, and I hope it works. There were other ways, there were better ways to address it, including a bill filed by a Republican colleague of mine in the House, Charlie Guerin, which I filed in the Senate, which would have committed the state to funding schools up front, not making the state's contribution dependent on how much we collect out of your rising property tax values. I'm saying there were better ways to address this problem. We could have fixed a problem with the tax code, which has shifted the burden of property taxes onto homeowners in favor of large property owners. But no, I couldn't get a hearing on that. Couldn't even get a hearing on that. That would have been a better way, in my view. That said, we started out with 2.5 with no exceptions. We wound up with a 3.5% trigger, not a cap, and exceptions for hospital districts, exceptions for community college districts, exceptions for indigent healthcare and indigent defense. Okay, that's better. That's a little more manageable. I still think it's an insult to our city governance, and it's an insult to the relationship between you as constituents and your city council members and your mayors and your county commissioners and your school board members. You don't like your taxes, don't vote for them. Something needed to be done. I hope this is a workable method. I hope this is one of those places where I shrug and go, yeah, okay, I guess it works. But I still don't think it was a good idea. I think it was frankly kind of populist and facile.
Representative Gonzalez.
In my opinion, I think this bill was more symbolic than anything. I think that we all understand how property taxes are tied to public education funding, and giving the mere impression that we are addressing property tax issues. I mean, our voters wanted us, our constituents wanted us to address this in a meaningful way, in a way that they're going to feel it, and people aren't going to feel this. And I don't feel that tying the hands of our local government is going to get us there. Yeah.
Can I have one thing, please? Thank you. I do want to address that most of your property tax relief came through House Bill 3, which all of us supported. More than 50% of the local property tax bill is attributable to education dollars, and the mechanisms that were put in place through the school finance bill, school finance reform bill, I think actually are going to be very helpful. We have exceptions for hospital districts and community college districts. What's left? City and counties. That's roughly a third of your property tax bill. So these tax caps that are coming at the expense of local control are going to have a very small effect on your ultimate tax bill. And if you ask me if I'd rather save $80 next year or have all the potholes on my street fixed, you can guess which one I'm going to vote for.
I imagine we could probably spend the rest of our time talking about property taxes, but I would like to move on. We may have questions about property taxes in the audience Q&A as well. But I wanted to talk about kind of the overall HB1, the budget that you all voted for. $250 billion for the biennium, a 16% increase in spending over what was approved in 2017. Why was this a good budget for Dallas and for the state? I'll open it up to anybody who can take that on.
Okay, I did serve 2 terms in the Appropriations Committee. Representative Sherman, you serve on the committee as well, is that right? Isn't that the learning process is pretty heavy? Yeah, you kind of like drinking water out of the fire hose to try to, yeah. So, well, earlier we think, no, it's a Dallas area. We probably did it okay, but we could have done better, you know. But the overall, the budget, I think is a very, very good budget, very, very fair, okay? And did we get a 100% support or just one person voted no in the House? One person, well, yeah.
We had zero
okay.
in the Senate.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so it's a very, very thoughtful budget, and Chairman Zerwas has worked diligently along with the subcommittee chairs and the process. When I serve on the Appropriations Committee for the first and second terms, we get up like 5 o'clock in the morning and tons of stuff to read, everything. It's a great honor, but it's also really, really kind of burn you out, okay? So once again, it's a broken record, partially maybe because I also serve on the higher ed committee. I really think we need to work on that. We will be bugging you, as I promised. And along with the UTD and UT Arlington. Actually, I talked to Senator, the Senator Nelson the other day at the bill signing ceremony in Dallas. You know what, Amanda? The Senator Nelson graduated from UT Arlington. So we need to take that approach, okay? Yeah, my point is that it has been a great budget, but we need to have more effort, more clout, so we can get more than the ones we are getting now, because I really don't think it's there yet. And I don't think that the conference committee for the budget, the North Texas area, except Nelson, yeah, we have any other. You know what I'm talking about. She was in my office almost every day, so I consider her as also my staff too. Okay, so.
I want to leave some time for audience questions, so I'm going to just end with one quick question. From your perspective, each of you, what was the biggest issue that didn't get addressed or resolved during this legislative session?
That's easy. Medicaid expansion. This is a source of revenue for the state. This is not a liberal social issue. You look at the report from the Perryman Group from 2012. Look at the update from about 6 weeks ago. 2012. Ray Perryman, who is generally regarded as one of the leading economists in the state of Texas, also generally regarded as leaning to the right and pro-business, said we've got to do this in Texas. And that was in 2012, and it was conjectural and theoretical and made everyone nervous, and it didn't happen. Now with the hindsight of 5 years of data, and they can plug the data into the formulas, and not only were they right, the upside of doing this now is greater than it was before. We're likely to see a $3.31 return for every dollar that the state puts in over a 10-year period. But who can look down the road 10 years, right? We can't do that in politics. It's a quarterly basis. Oh, that's Wall Street. It's a biennial basis. But the interesting thing about it is that $3.31 return, the first third of it roughly will be realized in the first 2 years. That's a single biennium. A third of $3.31 is $1.10, and we just put $1 in. That's a 10% profit. It pays for itself. We have healthier people and more jobs in this state. What are we doing? I hope we do it next session.
I like to put in my 2 cents. I totally, how much I respect.
$1.10.
Yeah. Well, okay, whatever you want to count. But I'm a CPA. I know how to count money. You know how much I respect you, okay? But I do want to bring out some issues about Medicaid, okay? It's great. And actually, my husband and I had several big. Darcy, raise your hand. Yeah, he's another free intern in my office. He and I had so many fights about this because he thinks we should take that. But my concern is, if we can take it as a block grant without any strings attached, so Texas can address our concerns, that would be great. Unfortunately, that's not the case. And also another issue, I don't know if you all know about that or not. Just recently, there's a study to show that 17% of the doctors, even just in the family practice, they don't take Medicaid. So there's another issue. Yeah, you're right. It's another issue. But I understand your concerns. But I do want to bring out some positive sides. What we have addressed. Earlier, I was talking to one of the ladies about this session. I personally put a lot of effort try to address the women's health issues. For example, that in Texas, we have concerns about the women maternal mortality issues, and we have the Healthy Texas Women Program, which can help after 2 months after the delivery, you drop out of the list, but the Healthy Texas Women, program can help you out. But the communication was not effective. So along with a bipartisan effort, I worked diligently with newly elected Senator Powell, who's a Democrat from the Tarrant County. And we have this bill to help women needed to understand where they can find the help. So we are doing a lot of things, and I know it will be easy to say that, but it's the decisions out there hasn't done that, so there are some major concerns. But I do want to put in the ones we have done to make a difference based on the resources we are able to get today.
I want to give Representative González and Representative Meyer a chance to speak, but then we'll get into audience Q&A.
I think personally, there are two broad issues that I would have liked for us to have addressed. One of them in the same vein of the maternal mortality issue that we know is a huge problem. We had the opportunity to address this by expanding Medicaid to longer, right? And so we failed to do that. And so this tends to affect women of color and of low income. And so we can do better. And so we need to address this issue. Now, another issue that I feel that we could have made bigger strides on is on criminal justice reform. We failed to, there was issues or bills that came up on decriminalization of marijuana, which had, it had support in the House, but it did not make it over to the Senate. Bail reform, like meaningful bail reform, and also protections for LGBTQ people, especially the transgendered community. We've seen that here in Dallas, murders that are happening out of hate. And so we need to do better. We need to protect everyone in the state.
And I'm going to take it a little more personally, down to a personal level with 2 bills, which just shows you how the process works that I'm personally disappointed. I had 2 bills. One that dealt with lengthening the statute of limitations for child abandonment and endangerment, which got out of the House and unfortunately did not get out of the Senate. And another one that dealt with a child who is a victim of domestic abuse can't be convicted of truancy. So for me, those are 2 bills which I think are pretty good ideas that I think the majority of y'all would agree with that didn't get out. And so I think for all of us, we probably have some bills that are personal in nature. For me, those 2, they just don't make sense that they didn't become law. And so I'll be doing it again next session when I get back. But those are my 2 personal disappointments where that is our job as government, is to help protect those when we have the ability to do so. I don't know why they didn't get out, but I'm going to certainly push for them again next session.
I haven't get a chance to talk about the things that I would like to get out more. Okay. I had made a major decisions because there are so young working families. Okay. Earlier we talked about the food aid, pre-K. That's wonderful. Okay. But how about the daycare center for the kids? Okay. You heard the horror stories over that. If you have a hidden camera, you saw the teacher beating up the little kids, something like that. So I had made a personal commitment to help the young couples and to address the daycare center issues. And I had a bill. It's talking about the employee turnover rate in the daycare center. There can be a lot of reasons why they have a high employee turnover rate, but it's early symptoms to tell something must be kind of fishy. You can take into that, but I tell you what, it's so hard to get the bill to pass through, okay? So I was, I guess sometimes you have to be creative. I was able to convert my bill into an amendment and tack on Representative Rainey's bill. So he had another one is working on the teacher and the student ratios in the daycare center. We were able to pass it out. So things like that, I would like to do more on that to help out the young couple, because with a good thing that Texas, especially North Texas economy is doing so well. We have so many young working couples, but hey, listen, their child's welfare in the concerns in the daycare center is something we need to address as well. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a microphone. If anyone has a question, please just raise your hand and Jessica will come over to you.
Thank you so much. I am Reverend Deneen Robinson. I'm the policy director for the AFIA Center. And I am so glad that you asked that last question, because I have 3 concerns. Number one, I'm curious as to why House Bill 744, which was the bill that actually was written by, sponsored by Representative Rose, looking at the expansion of Medicaid, that actually passed the House, but didn't even didn't get out of the Senate at all. And here's my concern about how you all rule for our state. It has become a political issue versus a personal issue. And I am very concerned as a person that represents Black women, and also has concern about women who are trans experience, that most of the politics gets in the way of the concerns of the people. And the AFIA Center wrote a report on maternal mortality, and we discovered that for our state, it is costing us way more money to not expand Medicaid than it would cost us if we would. And so I'm curious as to why we're not willing to expand Medicaid in this state. I'm curious as to that. And the second thing that I have concern about is when we look at healthcare in our state, we have the highest uninsured rate in the nation. Why is that not the priority in doing something about that?
Well, let's start with, I honestly don't remember House Bill 744, but it apparently didn't pass the House or the Senate, or did pass the House. I don't remember that passing.
It did pass the House.
Medicaid expansion passed the House.
Well, for the 744, right now, that's right. Actually, I voted yes for that. I just want you to know that The House did pass it, but the Senate didn't get a hearing. And I can't answer for the Senate, but you know.
Senator, we did our job, Senator. So.
It's my fault. It is not my fault. It's a wonderful bill. I'm proud of the House for passing it. The House did a lot of good things that the Senate didn't do. There is greater opposition to anything that rhymes with Medicaid in the Senate. There is a physical aversion to that idea. It didn't get a hearing in the Health and Human Services Committee, which I believe is where it might have gone through Business and Commerce. I'm not sure where it died, but it makes people in the Senate, Republican people in the Senate, not all of them, very, very nervous. And here's one of the reasons, and I'm a little bit sympathetic. There were some Republicans who wanted to take measures, like this is a very modest measure, the expansion of benefits from 2 months to 12 months for new mothers. This is not an overall Medicaid expansion. And there were people, Republicans in particular, in the legislature back in 2014 who tried to take some modest steps like this, which took some political courage, and they were severely punished for it. They either lost their seats or they lost their chairmanship. I mean, it was really politically risky. And so there's still a political toxicity associated with things that make a great deal of sense. I'm hoping that you all as voters can take some pressure off of people in either party who want to do these simple things that make sense without political consequence, or make the political consequence the opposite. You get promoted for voting the right way.
For the wonderful, passionate lady over there, that's why earlier I mentioned that when I see what happened to that bill, 744, I had a bill which I have been planning, and I know that will get a bipartisan support. That's the Healthy Texas Women Bill. And that one.
Party because of all the flack that they got from all those clinics that closed after 2011, all the flack that they got from community, and they put something in place to shut the community up. It does nothing. There's a consistent line throughout the whole thing that says, after we screen you, if you need further care, you're going to have to go someplace else. Well, they're going to charge you. It doesn't do anything. It's not a Medicaid replacement. It's a Band-Aid. It's a screening program.
That's why we had two major bills. One is my own bill. The other one is I'm the House sponsor for Senator co-host the bill. We revitalized that entire. You were right about there were a lot of issues, and with those two bills, I won't say address all the problems, but it did address a lot of things, a lot of problems. Please give a little time, let it digest, and let it work out. And by the way, I want you to know that I also, during the HB1, the budget process, I personally made the amendment to give $2 million for nursing, the home visiting nurses, so they can go to check on those families really needed. So every little bit of things, Medicaid expansion, that's a major issue, okay? And the senator was right about that. It's really not easy. If it's easy, it's already done, okay? So I cannot answer you the overall direction. But whatever we can do, we should not sit here and say, hey, that issue cannot be addressed or whatever, so we don't do anything. We should continue to do whatever we can do within our influence, and it's workable by bringing both sides together and make a difference. Even that's not the difference changing day and night, but it's a difference to those people who are in the position really, really need help. And that's my promise, and I will continue to do that, to serve.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. We got time for a couple more questions. If you could just raise your hand.
Thank you. My name is Amanda Domask, and It's good to see Representative Angie Chen Button. I worked for Clerk Haney a couple sessions back, but all the rest of the faces are new to me. I have been volunteering at this place called the Bridge Homeless Recovery Center downtown, and I work at intake, and that means I talk to people who are experiencing homelessness for the first time. Because of the point in time count, the last 2 years has gone up 9% year over year. People who are experiencing homelessness in Dallas County. And I was wondering, I know it's not always a state issue. Some of it's citywide, some of it's countywide. How are you prioritizing this? I know the homeless oftentimes don't vote, so it's hard to get the political will to change this, but it's financially straining our system, right? Socially straining our system with, I see hospital visits that don't need to be, police visits that don't need to be, because of those who, there's no affordable housing or there's a bottleneck, and we're just seeing an increase. So I'm wondering how you prioritize it and what we're doing at the state level. Thank you.
I don't want to take more than my fair share, but she mentioned affordable housing, and I happen to chair the urban affairs committee. I tell you what, you have a major concern right there, okay? Let me just share with you, my husband, well, which is my #1 intern, just show me another article. Did you know in Houston area, there are over 100,000 people registered to get the affordable housing, and I prefer to call it workforce housing, okay? And they are still on the waiting list. So now they don't even take applications now. And I don't know what's the situation in the Dallas area. Of course, that issue is different from the homeless issue. But I did talk to my colleague, and soon will be the mayor of our city, that that homeless issue has more, much more than just a housing issue. Has an economic impact issue. How about they try to help them have a job, that kind of stuff. So that's a whole 9 yards. And at this time, you remember the current mayor, well, soon he will retire. He has done a great job. And he used to be taking that homeless issue as his #1 issue. And he had an official position. Was he
Homeless czar.
That's right. Thank you for reminding. Yeah, but they're still there, So that's an issue for the major cities across the nation, unless you're living in, Idaho, too cold. Otherwise, you will see when the cities start to, have a lot of prosperities, you also have a lot of homeless issue. And my colleagues, can you help me in? Because this is much more than the affordable housing area.
Affordable housing is directly tied to homelessness, obviously. I mean, that has been my top priority this session. I did file several bills, on affordable housing, and kind of back to some issues that are politicized when they don't need to, right? That not when you're trying to create good policy. And I found that the word affordable housing it's like a bad word, right? And so people tend to shy away from it. But that was a priority of mine. As far as the homeless issue, yes, I mean, we can always do better. I know, a portion of our community that tends to go into homelessness is our LGBT youth. And so we need to address these issues, But mind you, we have a very limited amount of time to get things done. We have 140 days, and we wish we could pass every great bill that everybody's filed. But this is something that we can continue working on in the interim. And so I encourage you can reach out to any of our offices, and we're happy to to get something crafted for next session.
And real quickly, as you probably well know, part of the homeless problem is associated with mental health. The state actually has done, on a bipartisan basis, a better job this past session at investing in mental health programs. I do think that will go a long way towards preventing homelessness, as well as drug problems and some criminal justice reforms that failed. We can keep pursuing those things. All those will help. It's still not the total solution, but there are things we can do, and we're taking some good steps towards solving it, or or alleviating it.
We're going to have to end it there because we've run out of time. Please join me in thanking the legislators for being part of this panel. We really appreciate it. Thanks to all of you for coming. We really appreciate it. Thanks so much.